Good afternoon, guys. My name is Umair, and welcome back to another lesson of Listening and Speaking Q Skills 3. So today we're going to touch on Unit 6. We're going to do the first half of Unit 6. But before that, let's do a recap on what we learned in the last lesson. So in the last lesson, we talked about risks in Unit 5. What risks are good to take? So we talked about past perfect is used to show the relationship between two events or actions that happened in the past. So the first event, we use the past perfect with the verb had. And in the second event, we use a simple past. Usually the verb ends in ed. We also talked about the contraction of had and the meaning of contraction. So the meaning of contraction, we said, is to make something small. It's the opposite of expand. And usually the contraction of had has the word d at the end. So on page 106 it says I had. That becomes I'd. I'd already finished. He had, he'd. Then after we finished the contraction of had, we talked about giving a presentation, and we watched a video about giving a presentation, a good presentation versus a bad presentation. So we talked about signposting, which is a language used to tell the audience where you are in regards to the lecture, the beginning, middle or end. So now a short video on past perfect so we can summarize what we did in the last lesson, one part of the last lesson.
The past perfect. We use the past perfect to show that an action or event happened before another event or time in the past.
I called the police because I had found a wallet on the street. By the age of 16, I had learned how to drive.
We form the past perfect with had plus the past participle form of the verb. To form the negative, we use had not or the contraction hadn't. Listen to the sentences. Does the speaker use had or hadn't?
I had never skydived before. It hadn't been long since we saw her last. The sun had already gone down, so it was dark outside. She hadn't driven in Europe before, so she was nervous.
We often use the past perfect with by plus a time to show that something happened before a specific time.
By noon, I had done the laundry. I had also cleaned the whole kitchen.
In this sentence, we are saying that doing the laundry and cleaning the kitchen had both been finished before 12 o'clock. By, in this sentence, has a similar meaning to the word before. We also use the past perfect with the simple past. We use the past perfect for the first action and the simple past for the second action.
By the time I got home, I had already gone to the store to pick up groceries.
Here, we are using the past perfect to describe the past of the past. Using had gone shows that the speaker went to the store first, and that this was finished before she got home. By the time, in this sentence, also has a similar meaning to the word before. Past time clauses. When we use the past perfect with the simple past, we often use a past time clause, beginning with a conjunction, such as by the time, when, or before.
Class had already started by the time I got to school. We had already eaten dinner when they arrived. She had found an apartment online before she moved to Paris.
Notice that for the verb in the time clause, we use the simple past, not the past perfect. When we use past time clauses with until, we often use the negative form of the past perfect.
I hadn't woken up until my alarm went off. I hadn't owned my own car until I was 20 years old.
Read the sentences. Complete each sentence with the simple past or past perfect form of the verb in parentheses.
My family had sold our house in Vietnam before we moved to Australia. By the time Priscilla accepted the job, she had worked in advertising for 10 years. We had hung all of our laundry out to dry when it began to rain.
The past perfect with adverbs. We often use the past perfect with adverbs, such as already and never.
We were ready because we had already bought our tickets. Before I went to Africa, I had never seen a leopard in the wild.
Read the sentences. What other adverbs can we use with the past perfect? If you said just, yet, and ever, you are correct. Just explains that something had happened very recently. Yet and ever are often used with the negative form of the past perfect.
Okay, guys, now we move on to Unit 6. So that we're on page 110. As you can see on page 110, the unit question is, are we responsible for the world we live in? So, first question, what does to take responsibility mean? Well, as you can see on the screen, it means, essentially, this means acknowledging the role you play in your life, the good bits and the bad bits. Rather than looking around for someone or something else to blame, you must accept that you are in charge of what is going on. So essentially, in conclusion, everybody has a role to play in this world. Okay? Second question, do you think you are a responsible citizen? So what do you do to take responsibility for your actions? Okay, and it says in the picture, what can you see? So it's a nuclear power plant next to a field with solar radiation panels. Okay, now we're going to listen to the Q Classroom online. Then we're going to answer the questions. So the first question is, what 3 ideas are mentioned as ways in which people can be responsible in their communities? Which of these things do you do? Which don't you do, and why not? Second question. Felix says it is not realistic to expect everyone to do those things, as they don't have time. Do you agree? So now let's listen.
Unit 6, Philosophy, the Q Classroom.
The unit question for Unit 6 is, are we responsible for the world we live in? So let's talk about what that means. First, how can people be responsible in their communities?
They can recycle.
They can volunteer in their neighborhood. They can vote.
Good examples. Let's take recycling. Do you recycle, Una?
Yes, I do.
Why?
It's important for the environment.
How about you, Marcus?
I recycle when it's convenient, like in the cafeteria, where there are separate bins for glass and cans. But otherwise, I don't have time for separating paper and plastic and taking it somewhere for recycling.
Okay, but should we be responsible for the world we live in? Is it important to make time for things like recycling and volunteering in the community and learning about the issues so you can vote?
It's important, but it's not realistic to expect everyone to do those things. People have to work and study. Lots of people don't have time to do other things. I think the government needs to take over some of the responsibility for people, like making recycling easy and setting up volunteer programs so it's easy to participate.
Do you agree with that, Sophie? Should we be responsible as individuals, or should we have the government take over some responsibility?
Well, I think we all need to be responsible, but we can make it easier if we work together.
Okay, guys, now that you've listened to it, you can answer those questions on page 111. And as you can see, there is a video you can watch online about Tom's shoes. So there are some words in the video. Betterment, the process of becoming or making someone or something better. Yeah. Stigma, feelings of disapproval about certain illnesses or behavior. And finally, take it for granted. Be so accustomed to do something that you no longer think about its value.
Unit
So, the theory of social responsibility is built on a system of ethics, so our behavior, good or bad, in which decisions and actions must be ethically validated before proceeding. Validated means to agree, yes or no. If the action or decision causes harm to society or the environment, then it would be considered to be socially irresponsible. So in essence, what this means, if you do an action that is bad, it's going to have a bad impact on the environment or society, that means you're being irresponsible and you should change your behavior. Moral values that are inherent in society create a distinction between right and wrong. In this way, social fairness is believed by most people to be in the right, but more frequently than not, this fairness is absent. Everybody has a responsibility to act in a manner that is beneficial to society and not solely to the individual. So what this means is that everybody knows what moral values are, good and bad. This is apparent, this is known in society, wherever you live in the world. You know what is right and know what is wrong, and you separate them. And you do something which is good for society and not just for yourself. If you do something for yourself but it's bad for society, that means you're being selfish, and that's not what we want. There are some words on page 112 that we should look into. I will only go through some of the words. So the first word, benefit. What does benefit mean? It means something good that helps you. What is the benefit of learning English? So you can communicate with other people around the world. Consumer. Someone who buys or uses goods or services. So we are all consumers. We go shopping, we buy food, we buy clothes and phones and so on. Next word, demand. A need for something. I demand my money. Okay, we'll move on. Ignore. Ignore means to not give attention to something or someone. Okay, he ignored his friend, meaning he didn't give any attention to his friend. Impact. The effect that a person has on someone or something. Okay, we'll look at fair. So treating everybody in the same way. And lastly, we'll look at pollute. Pollute means to make water, air, soil dirty or harmful. Now let's look at page 113, exercise 8. It says listen and take notes. So you're going to listen to the lecture. As you listen, complete the notes. So we're going to play that now for you.
Unit 6. Listening 1. Activity A.
This morning, I'd like to talk to you about CSR, or Corporate Social Responsibility. That is, the belief that companies need to be responsible for the economic, social, and environmental impact of their actions. Of course, companies want to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. However, increasingly, people are asking, at what cost? What is the cost to us, the planet, and the society we live in? It is this balance between profit and social responsibility in the corporate world that I want to look at today. Believe it or not, this issue affects everyone, including you, directly. We are all happy to buy our clothes more cheaply But do we stop to think where they were made and who made them? Do you know who made your jeans, your shirt, or your running shoes? There are over 150 million children around the world in employment today. They are working often in dangerous and difficult conditions. Some of these children might have produced the clothes you are wearing right now. How does that make you feel? Worried? Well, you should be concerned, because the fact is, there are companies that show little or no interest in social responsibility. They employ children because they learn quickly, and they're cheap. They don't care about their safety. They don't provide health care. They save money by polluting our rivers and oceans. Yes, these companies may make their products in countries in the developing world, but they are owned and managed by companies in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere, countries that claim to have higher standards of social and environmental care. What's more, people living in developed countries seem quite happy to ignore these standards when they want to buy products cheaply. But things are changing. Corporate social responsibility is becoming a big issue these days. Consumers are starting to take a greater interest in the companies they buy products from. More and more consumers are demanding that companies pay their workers a fair wage. As for workers, they also expect companies to protect their safety and perhaps provide health care and other benefits. In addition, governments are starting to demand that companies reduce the pollution they cause. They're beginning to stop companies behaving in a way that harms the health of local residents and the environment. Thanks to pressure from all of these sources, consumers, workers, and governments, things are changing for the better. This brings us to an important part of responsibility, the question of who is responsible. Imagine a company is polluting the environment. Who is responsible? Is it the company itself, or the individual manager that is to blame for allowing the pollution? It's not an easy question to answer. Take another example. A big brand-name clothes company uses a local manufacturer in a developing country to produce their running shoes. The local company employs children in terrible conditions. They work for less than $1 a day, up to 16 hours a day in dirty and dangerous conditions. Who is responsible this time? Is it the local manufacturer or the big brand name company that buys from them? Or are we responsible as consumers who are happy to buy the running shoes at a cheap price? And exactly how can you force any company to be responsible? Huge fines will help, and the negative effect on public opinion of media reports. But it's not easy. Nevertheless, some companies are socially responsible in the way they run their business. We shouldn't forget that. As consumers demand higher standards, more companies are trying to improve the lives of their workers and the society they live in. These companies show that profit and social responsibility can go together. I'd like to consider a few important case studies now, beginning with the example of the cooperative movement that goes back to 19th century Britain.
Okay, once you've done exercise A, move on to exercise B. It says read the statements. Write true or false according to what the professor says. So you might need to listen back to the audio to answer that question. So now we'll move on to exercise C. It says read the sentences, then listen again. Circle the answer that best completes each sentence. So read the sentences first. So once you've done that, then we can listen to the audio again. I'm going to play that now for you.
Unit 6. Listening 1. Activity C.
This morning, I'd like to talk to you about CSR, or Corporate Social Responsibility. That is, the belief that companies need to be responsible for the economic, social, and environmental impact of their actions. Of course, companies want to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. However, increasingly, people are asking, at what cost? What is the cost to us, the planet, and the society we live in? It is this balance between profit and social responsibility in the corporate world that I want to look at today. Believe it or not, this issue affects everyone, including you, directly. We are all happy to buy our clothes more cheaply, but do we stop to think where they were made and who made them? Do you know who made your jeans, your shirt, or your running shoes? There are over 150 million children around the world in employment today. They are working often in dangerous and difficult conditions. Some of these children might have produced the clothes you are wearing right now. How does that make you feel? Worried? Well, you should be concerned, because the fact is, there are companies that show little or no interest in social responsibility. They employ children because they learn quickly, and they're cheap. They don't care about their safety. They don't provide health care. They save money by polluting our rivers and oceans. Yes, these companies may make their products in countries in the developing world, but they are owned and managed by companies in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere, countries that claim to have higher standards of social and environmental care. What's more, people living in developed countries seem quite happy to ignore these standards when they want to buy products cheaply. But things are changing. Corporate social responsibility is becoming a big issue these days. Consumers are starting to take a greater interest in the companies they buy products from. More and more consumers are demanding that companies pay their workers a fair wage. As for workers, they also expect companies to protect their safety and perhaps provide health care and other benefits. In addition, governments are starting to demand that companies reduce the pollution they cause. They are beginning to stop companies behaving in a way that harms the health of local residents and the environment. Thanks to pressure from all of these sources, consumers, workers, and governments, things are changing for the better. This brings us to an important part of responsibility, the question of who is responsible. Imagine a company is polluting the environment. Who is responsible? Is it the company itself, or the individual manager that is to blame for allowing the pollution? It's not an easy question to answer. Take another example. A big brand-name clothes company uses a local manufacturer in a developing country to produce their running shoes. The local company employs children in terrible conditions. They work for less than $1 a day, up to 16 hours a day in dirty and dangerous conditions. Who is responsible this time? Is it the local manufacturer or the big brand name company that buys from them? Or are we responsible as consumers who are happy to buy the running shoes at a cheap price? And exactly how can you force any company to be responsible? Huge fines will help, and the negative effect on public opinion of media reports. But it's not easy. Nevertheless, some companies are socially responsible in the way they run their business. We shouldn't forget that. As consumers demand higher standards, more companies are trying to improve the lives of their workers and the society they live in. These companies show that profit and social responsibility can go together. I'd like to consider a few important case studies now, beginning with the example of the cooperative movement that goes back to 19th century Britain.
Okay guys, that's exercise C. Once you've done that, we can move on to exercise D. And the question says, what 2 ways does the professor say companies can be forced to behave more responsibly? So you might need to listen again and answer that question. Moving on to exercise F. So the vocabulary that we learned, as you can see on the screen, we're going to put them in the correct sentences. So there are 10 sentences. I'll do 2 with you together and the rest you can do by yourselves. So as a something, I always try to buy products from companies I know well. So here we know it's a noun. So we know it's not going to be fair, pollute, ignore, or demand. So the word here, the correct word is consumer. Moving on to exercise 2. Most people agree that companies should pay their workers a something wage. So again, it's a noun we're looking for. So what is it going to be? A fine wage. The answer could be fine wage. But I guess you could also say fair wage. Even though it said it should be a noun, I would accept fair as an answer. And the rest you can do by yourselves. Okay, on page 115.
Unit
It says, how important is it for companies to be socially responsible? What are the benefits? So, some key points. Corporate social responsibility is important to both consumers and companies. An example is Starbucks. They are a leader in creating corporate social responsibility programs in many aspects of its business. Corporate responsibility programs are a great way to raise morale in a workplace. So morale means to make everybody happy, that they work efficiently. So this is a case study, and there are many case studies of corporate responsibility. You can look online on Google. One of them is Starbucks. It says, as per its 2018 Global Social Impact Report, these milestones include reaching 99% of ethically sourced coffee. What does that mean? It means they got the coffee from ethically sourced companies in Brazil, Colombia, or even Africa. Creating a global network of farmers, pioneering green building throughout its stores, contributing millions of hours of community service, and creating a groundbreaking college program for its partners' employees. So the farmers are being treated fairly, they're getting a good wage, they're not working a lot of hours. Pioneering green building, so the building materials, they get the wood, they make sure the wood comes from a place where the trees are being looked after. So for every tree they cut down, they maybe plant 2 or 3 trees. Community service, creating a groundbreaking college program. So the people who work for Starbucks, they have the opportunity to enter into a college program, so they can develop in their careers, take other courses, achieve certificates, so they can gain more skills. Okay, going on to the next page, page 116. Inferring a speaker's attitude. So before we start, what is the meaning of attitude? It's a feeling or opinion about something or someone, or a way of behaving that is caused by this. So some people are nervous, so they have a hesitant voice. Some people are angry, so they raise their voice. Some people are bored, so there's low level voice with no intonation. So what is intonation? Intonation is the rise and fall of the voice in speaking. So if I say good morning, I'm speaking loud. If I'm speaking a low level tonation, I would say, how are you doing? Or even lower than that, how are you doing? It says you can learn a lot about a speaker's attitude by noticing the way he talks. Some people are hesitant, like I said. Some people are angry. Some people are bored. Now we're going to listen to this excerpt from the lecture. Notice that the professor raises his voice. This indicates he feels passionately about the topic. He loves this topic. He likes to talk about it, and is perhaps a little angry. So let's start.
Unit 6. Listening skill. Examples. 1.
We are all happy to buy our clothes more cheaply, but do we stop to think where they were made and who made them?
2.
It's the neighbor again. What does he want this time?
Excuse me, would you mind turning down the TV, please?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, as you can see, speaker A is speaking in a low level intonation. Speaker B, he's hesitant. He's not being assertive. He's not being sure. Excuse me, he's being nervous. Okay, we have some words here that we need to go over. So, like before, we won't go over all the words. So the word appropriate is right for a particular situation or person. For example, is this movie appropriate for young children? Meaning, can young people watch this movie? Okay, next word, guilty. Guilty means feeling bad because you've done something wrong. And to put that in an example sentence, I feel so guilty about missing her party. Okay, and then we'll look up at check up on. What does the word check up on mean? It means to try to discover what someone is doing in order to be certain that the person is doing what they should be doing. So your parents might check up on you with regards to your homework, trying to find out if you're doing your homework, which is what you should be doing. Yeah, so in an example sentence it would be, my mom checks up on me most evenings to see that I've done my homework. Okay, let's look at obligation, something that you must do. You don't have a choice. Yeah, I don't have time to do his work for him. I have too many obligations as it is. There's too many things to do that he has to do. He has no choice. And lastly, we look at influence. The power to have an effect on people or things, or a person or thing that is able to do this. So, Helen's a bad or good influence on him. He has a huge amount of influence over the city council. He can persuade them easily. So, another example of the definition of influence: to affect or change how someone or something develops. So, in an example sentence, she's very good at making friends and influencing people. So you have many people online, like Instagram, they call them influencers. They influence the way people behave, dress, or even buying certain things as a consumer.
Unit 6. Listening skill.
So now let's look at exercise A. Matches each sentence with the speaker's attitude.
Unit 6. Listening skill. Activity A. 1.
Did you know that this is a non-smoking area?
2.
I don't know why Simon's always late for work.
3.
Yeah, that garbage has been there for a week.
Okay. Once you've done that, we're going to exercise B. It says listen to each conversation. Tick the word that describes how the woman feels. So we have uninterested, meaning she doesn't care, she's not bothered, she's not interested. Angry and nervous.
Unit 6. Listening skill. Activity B. 1.
Guess what? I have to work overtime all next week.
No! You mean you won't be home for dinner?
I won't be home until 9.
That's crazy. They can't force you to work overtime, can they?
2.
It says here that the chemical company polluted the river again last week.
Right. That's the third time this year, isn't it?
I think so.
3.
City Hall, how may I direct your call?
I'd like to speak to Environmental Services, please.
And the reason for your call?
Well, the park in our neighborhood is terrible. I mean, there's litter everywhere, and nobody has picked it up.
I see. One moment, please.
Okay, once you've done that, you can complete exercise C with a friend or a family member, a brother or sister, or your parents. Let's move on to page 117.
Unit 6.
Do you think you are responsible? Ask yourself these questions. Do you buy a lot of plastic items? If so, do you recycle them? How often do you buy clothes? So something called fast fashion. Inexpensive clothing produced rapidly by mass market retailers in response to the latest trends. Do you recycle your clothes? Okay. Do you carry out any volunteering? Do you work for any charities at the weekend or in the evening? How much energy do you consume? Do you drive your car a lot? If you drive a car, do you have an electric car or do you use diesel or petrol? How much electricity you use in your house or in your apartment? Do you try to reduce wastage and pollution to the environment? For example, keeping your surroundings clean, so on and so forth. Okay, so page 117. We went through the words on the previous page. Exercise A, it says, listen and take notes. Listen to the first part of a seminar. A seminar is a lecture or a lesson on personal responsibility. Note the examples of each student gives of ways in which they take individual responsibility at home.
Unit 6. Listening 2. Activity A.
So, you're all ready to discuss this week's assignment, I hope. Individual responsibility. I'd like to start with our personal experiences and focus on home life. Naomi, would you like to begin?
Sure. Well, speaking for myself, I live with my parents, and so I think it's important to help out as much as possible. For example, I'm in charge of taking out the garbage and sorting all the bottles, papers, and plastic things for recycling.
How important do you think that obligation is?
Recycling? It's really important. I mean, my mom and dad don't really care, so that's why I do it all.
And Michael, how about you?
Oh, I help out around the house. I do the dishes after meals and wash the car every weekend on Saturday mornings. Those are my main responsibilities.
And you, Nina?
Oh, I have to look after my little sister when my parents are busy. She's 7, so when I get back home, I usually make her dinner and help her with her homework, that kind of thing.
Mark, what are you responsible for at home?
I take care of our pets. We have 2 rabbits and a cat, and they're quite a lot of work.
Okay guys, once you've done that, you can move on to exercise B. Once you finished exercise B, you can move on to exercise C. So for exercise C, you need to listen to this audio to complete it.
Unit 6. Listening to Activity C.
So it seems as if you all feel responsible for helping out at home in some way. Okay, let's widen this out a little now and think a little more about parents and children. How many of you have parents who always want to know where you are? I see, quite a few. How do you feel about that? Mark?
Well, I know they worry about me when I go out. I guess that means they feel responsible for me, but I wish they would, relax. They should just trust me to be sensible. They don't need to check up on me, where I go, or the friends I have, but they do. They call me all the time when I'm out. It makes me really angry sometimes.
It's not always easy for parents, is it? Do any of you sometimes lie to your parents? Maybe tell your parents you're going to one place when in fact you go somewhere else. Neil?
Once, yeah.
Can you tell us about it?
Well, they don't like me playing computer games at home. So I said I was going to the park when I really went to Jason's house and played games. I felt really guilty, so I told them and promised never to do it again.
Why do you think your parents don't like you playing computer games, Neil?
They say they're too violent, and they think there's too much bad language, all that.
Are they right?
Yeah, I guess so. But playing those games doesn't mean I become violent and use bad language all the time. I want them to trust me more. Trust me to be responsible. I'm old enough to make my own decisions.
How do the rest of you feel about that? So you want your parents to trust you to be responsible. Does age have something to do with it? The amount of responsibility your parents think is appropriate might depend on how old you are. Yes, Naomi.
Yes, I think that's right. But by the age of 16, you're old enough to know the difference between right and wrong.
Neil, do you agree with that?
Yes, I'd say around 15, 16. You should be responsible for what you do by then.
I don't agree at all.
Really, Mark? Why not?
You're still too young at 16. People can influence you in the wrong way. I know people who changed a lot in high school, in a bad way, because they met the wrong people, had the wrong friends. I think you have to be 20 before you're really responsible.
Michael?
I think you can be responsible from a much younger age. From the age of 5 or 6, your parents can teach you what is right and wrong, how to behave, how to respect other people, and...
Okay guys, once you finish exercise C, you are required to complete D, E and F. So for F, the words in bold, you need to put those words according to the correct definition. So let's look at the word influence. So that would be E, to have an effect on. Okay, so what other words can we do? To assist by doing useful jobs, I. That would be help out.
Unit 6.
So, to sum up, what can companies do to protect the environment? Some example answers could be use environmentally friendly products. Products that come from sources that are environmentally friendly. Hire environmental cleanup services. Only deal with companies that are good to the environment. Decrease paper waste. That means unnecessary printing. If you don't need to print it, don't print it. Provide employees with filtered water. So no plastic water bottles. Every employee has their own bottle, whether that be metal or some sort of plastic. Obviously metal will be better. Permit telecommuting. That means not commuting to work. So right now, many people all over the world are working from home. Yeah, so that means not many people are driving or taking the train. If you're driving, that means you're using fuel, which is bad for the environment. And also, before you finish your work, you leave the office, you make sure you switch off the computer so you're not wasting any electricity. So on page 120, there are some more questions for you to think about and answer. And in the next lesson, we're going to talk about the use of a dictionary. We're going to go through some grammar, gerunds and infinitives. We're going to go over stress of important words. And we're going to talk about leading a group discussion. So, hope